Picking up with Sonnet 29. I have no idea how many of these we'll actually get through. We may just keep going and do these and then leer, and then if we need to drop stuff towards the end, we will. Okay, now from where we left off on Sonnet 20 to up here in 29, in the course of the sonnets, you get this impression that something has happened in the relationship between the speaker of the sonnets and the golden-haired youth. Okay? It's not exactly clear what, but it's kind of like there's some rocky territory. Okay? So look at 29. When in disgrace with fortune in men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented lest. That's how it would have been pronounced in Shakespeare's day. Yet in these thoughts myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my state like to the lark at break of days arising from sullen earth sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. Okay. So, line 2, the speaker mentions, my outcast state. Why? Outcast from what? Say it again, Tanya. Yeah, from the golden-haired youth. Okay? Look at it again. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state. So what has happened? The universe has conspired against him, apparently. Disgrace in fortune means poor fortune, unfortunate events, okay? And men's eyes. Well, what do people generally tend to do? You're driving down the road, or you're walking on the greenway, and you see some guy living under a bridge. Now, if you're completely honest, most people say, ew, glad I'm not him. Okay? That is someone who is, what? In disgrace with fortune. Okay? And so what people tend to do when somebody loses their fortune, not their wealth, but their good luck, is they kind of go, glad it's him and not me. Okay? He says, so when fortune conspires against me, and when people's judgment of me turns south, what do? I all alone beweep my outcast state. Why all alone? It's like he has the plague. Nobody wants to be around this person. What happens, in politics when a politician is discovered to be corrupt or something? Yeah, what happens to all that politician's friends? They're the first ones to jump ship. The whole fair weather friend, mentality. Okay? So what does he do when he's all alone? I trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries. Praise and praise and praise, but heaven is deaf. God doesn't hear. That's why the cries are bootless. Bootless does not mean he doesn't have any boots. It means they lack remedy. His prayers are not being answered. And I look upon myself and I curse my fate. Oh, fate. It's a little different than fortune. Fate's an ancient Greek idea. Fortune isn't. Fortune's a medieval notion. Okay? So, what does he do when he curses his fate? Line 5. I wish me, that is, I wish myself, like to one more rich in hope. I wish that I were like somebody, what? Who had hope. More rich in hope means somebody who has hope. This person, keep in mind, he's already told us what? He doesn't have any hope. Okay? So I wish myself like to one more rich in hope. And then he gives us another example. Featured like him, meaning I wish I looked like him. Okay? So the first example is I wish I was like this guy over here who has all kinds of hope. Second example, I wish I looked like this guy over here. Third example, I wish I was like this guy who was possessed with friends. Or like this person who has art. Doesn't mean he has paintings hanging on the wall. It means desiring this man's art, his technical ability, and that man's scope, his breadth, let's say, of artistic ability. I mean, don't you know some people that you really just hate? Because they are so stinking artistically gifted. They can sing, they can play a variety of musical instruments, they can draw, they can write stories, they compose poetry. It's like everything they try is gold. Just makes me so angry. It's not fair. Pardon? Scope, breadth, depth. Okay? Like, the scope of a vision would be how much you see rather than a little narrow sliver. So when he says desiring that man's scope, he means desiring that man's broad ability. Okay? With what I most enjoy, contented least. Now that's kind of interesting because that line doesn't tell us what it is the speaker most enjoys. But the speaker does enjoy something. But the particular thing the speaker enjoys, what's he tell us? That's the one thing that gives him the least pleasure. Okay? With what I most enjoy, contented least. Then you get that volta that we talked about the other day, that all Italian sonnets have, and that Shakespeare weaves into often his English sonnets. Yet. What does yet mean there? Give me another word for yet. But, however, nevertheless, in these thoughts myself almost despising. What does the speaker do? Happily I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising. Notice the image. The lark, little bird, break of day, sun comes up, and what does the lark do? It ascends. It rises into the heavens or into the skies. So, what does his state do? It rises. Okay. What rises? Heavy stuff or light stuff? Light stuff. Okay? So his soul loses its weight. It loses the burdens holding it down. Its fate, its ill fortune, its bad reputation in men's eyes, all those things. It's like they all fall off. And he ascends into the skies. From sullen earth sings hymns at heaven's gate. Now, what did we hear earlier? Earlier, he troubles deaf heaven with bootless cries. Now what happens? The soul, the state, we're told, of the speaker rises to heaven and sings hymns at heaven's gates. What are, how do I put this? Describes them as hymns, not as cries. In other words, these aren't petitions. These aren't, oh God, help me. What are they? Thank you, Jesus. That's what they are. They're praises. They're thanksgiving. Okay? For what? What has changed? Is he still outcast? Yep. Does he still have ill fortune? Yep. Does he still lack the other guy's hope, the other guy's looks, the other guy's friends, the other guy's art, the other guy's scope? Yep. Still doesn't have any of that. So what has changed? His outlook, his perspective, his attitude. Why? Haply I think on thee, for thy sweet love remembered. Such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. Notice, it's not thy sweet love experienced. It's not your sweet love right now, present tense. No, it's I have memories of your love. And that's enough. That is enough to bring the speaker out of despair. Okay? Now, that's a good poem. That's a beautiful poem when you think about it. Because what becomes dependent on, let me rephrase that. How do I put this? Who becomes controller of the speaker's attitude?
The speaker.
The speaker. So, what becomes the source of the speaker's joy? Exactly. And Shakespeare seems to be suggesting, could be wrong here, that's why I said seems to be suggesting, don't look for joy, love, happiness, fulfillment, all those kinds of things in somebody else. It's got to come from within. Okay? Now look at the next one. I do have the next one. Yeah. Listen to the sound of this poem. I mean, in Shakespeare's sonnets, well, everything in Shakespeare, it's meant to be heard. It's not meant to be read silently on a page. Shakespeare is writing for the ear more than anything else. When to the sessions of sweet silent thought I summon up remembrance of things past, I sigh the lack of many a thing I sought, and with old woes new wail my dear time's waste. Then can I drown an eye unused to flow for precious friends hid in death's dateless night, and weep afresh love's long since cancelled woe, and moan the expense of many a vanished sight. Then can I grieve at grievances forgone, and heavily from woe to woe tell o'er the sad account of fore bemoaned moan, which I knew pay, as if not paid before. But if the while I think on thee, dear friend, all losses are restored, and sorrows end. First line, when to the sessions of sweet silent thought. Now, your gloss tells you that sessions means judicial sittings. Yes, that is a very narrowly defined understanding of that word sessions. You know what sessions also means? Sitting. When to the sittings of sweet, silent thought. Have you ever experienced this? Just sat and thought. Just meditated, ruminated on life. Okay? So he's saying, when those experiences come, what does he do? I summon up remembrance of things past. I summon, I bring to the fore. The idea is that normally these remembrances of things past are what? Buried. Okay? And what does he do when he summons up the remembrance of things past? I sigh the lack of many a thing I sought. Now, tense is very important. I sigh, what tense is that? Present tense. I sigh the lack of many a thing I, past tense. So is he saying, I sigh currently, now, the lack of things I sought before. That is, I sigh that I still don't have that 2014 Chevy Camaro or something, whatever the thing is. Is that what he means? Or is he saying, I sigh the lack of many a thing I sought? Meaning, man, did I waste my time back then when I sought things that never came, that I never got. And with old woes, new wail, my dear time's waste. Notice the alliteration. What? Old woes, old sorrows, things that happened a long time in the past. I do what? I wail now. For what? The time I wasted. Okay? It's almost like this is what Thoreau has in mind when he writes in Walden, okay, that how do most people live their lives? He says the mass of humanity live lives of quiet desperation, going around the world asleep, which is why he goes off to Walden Pond. Why? Because he wants to suck the marrow out of life so that he knows when he died, he really lived. Okay? So, then when? When to the sessions of sweet silent thought. So, when he has one of these sessions, then can I drown an eye, unused to flow, for precious friends hid in death's dayless night. Then, when he thinks about this, when he summons up these remembrances of things past, he says, then I shed tears. For what? For dead friends. But notice what he says about his normal condition of his eyes. Unused to flow. So what's he suggesting there? Yeah, this is a good Brit. Stiff upper lip and all that kind of stuff, Englishmen don't cry in public. They're not like the French. The French cry at the drop of a hat. You ruin some bread, and they go all crazy. Not the English. Okay? Could be that. What else, though? And I weep afresh love's long since canceled woe. What does that mean? Love's long since canceled woe. He weeps afresh right now in this session of sweet silent thought for all the lovers I've known before, all those broken affairs, all those gone, girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever, love's long since canceled woe. That's what he means. Okay? If you've ever been in love before and broken up, that's the woe. And so what's he doing? He's weeping afresh for all those woes. And moan the expense of many a vanished sight. That is, moans now the expense, the loss of a vanished sight, dead friends, dead lovers. Then, then can I grieve at grievances foregone. Grievances foregone. Grievances what? In the past. Well, what kind of grievances? Think of the long since canceled woe. What sometimes happens between lovers. They have a fight. They break up. That's a grievance. Then can I grieve at grievances foregone. What's he saying? When I do all this, then I can think, man, what an ass I was. How stupid to get involved in that. How horrible for this problem to have divided us. If you've ever been best friends with someone and had a conflict come between you and really sever that friendship, and I mean sever like it is still an open wound. Okay? That seems to me to be what he's talking about. And heavily from woe to woe tell o'er. Notice what this individual is thinking about in these sessions of sweet silent thought thus far. Is there anything good? Does he think about the positive aspects of the previous lovers? Is he thinking about the wonderful sights he has seen? No. It's all depressing stuff. It's all, oh, what a horrible person I've been. The sad account of four bemoaned moan. So he goes from woe to woe, and he tells, meaning counts, the sad account, like he's going through a ledger, of four bemoaned moan. Four bemoaned, because these are things he's moaned for in the past. And now he's moaning for them again, which I knew pay. It's like he's, taking out his wallet and handing over the payment all over again. Meaning, experiencing them afresh. But if while he's going through this sad accounting of his past, if the while I think on thee, dear friend, all losses are restored and sorrows end. So what does that tell us about the dear friend that is addressed? If he has scales, okay, that is holding everything, and these are all the previous woes, okay, what's the scale normally like? It's like this. The other side is up here. But if he thinks about the dear friend, that gets wiped out. Thinking on the friend does what? Restores joy. It restores happiness. Notice, it's thinking on the friend. It's not, picking up the phone and calling the friend. It's not going and seeing the friend. Okay, Brian?
Is the friend the golden still?
Probably. Yeah. with few exceptions, in the first 126 sonnets. With few exceptions, the friend, if a friend is mentioned, is going to be the golden-haired youth. In the few exceptions that exist, it's clear that it's not the golden-haired youth. In which case, it can be the dark lady, or there's a couple of others where it's somewhat ambiguous, which I'll try and point out when we get to those. Okay, now jump to 55. Skipping a bunch. Not a bunch in our book, but a bunch in the actual sequence. Okay. This is one on time. Not marble, nor the gilded monuments of princes shall outlive this powerful rhyme. Okay. Pretty popular couplet. But you shall shine more bright in these contents than unswept stone. And if this is just about my favorite half line in all of Shakespeare. Besmeared with sluttish time. Why is time called a slut? Think about it. What does time do? Time sleeps with everything. Everything. And what does a slut do? A slut besmears. A slut dirties. What does time do? Think of the description of the golden-haired youth in the first 20 sonnets. What happens? When 40 years have besieged thy brow, it wears you away. You know, look at Mel Gibson in his 30s and look at Mel Gibson now. Look at Mickey Rourke, as I said the other day, in his 30s or 20s, and look at Mickey Rourke now. Look at, I can't say look at Hugh Jackman in his 20s and look at him in his 40s, because he's even better in his 40s. It's just not fair. You know. Okay. So, when wasteful war shall statues overturn and broils root out the work of masonry, nor Mars his sword, nor war's quick fire shall burn the living record of your memory. So, time won't take care of you. Violent quarrels won't kill you. War, the sword of Mars, nothing's going to harm the living record of your memory. Why? Because against death and all oblivious enmity, that is, all enmity that leads to oblivion. That's what that line really means. Shall you pace forth? And what does he mean, pace forth? He doesn't just mean walk. He means shoulders up, head up, strutting against time and death, like there's this huge foggy mist. You're going to come walking out of that mist. Your praise shall still find room even in the eyes of all posterity, that wear this world out to the ending doom. And Shakespeare likes that idea of the ending doom. We're going to see it in another poem. Meaning judgment. So, till the judgment that yourself arise, that is when you rise from the dead, you live in this poem, and dwell in lovers' eyes. Who's the lover? There's two, at least. One, the author, or the speaker. Who's the other lover? Everyone who reads the poem. Because we become the lover by reading the poem. Okay? That's pretty sneaky on Shakespeare's part. It's, pretty crafty logic there. Turn to 71. No longer mourn for me when I am dead, then you shall hear the surly, sullen bell. Give warning to the world that I am fled from this vile world, with vilest worms to dwell. Well, that's a nice image to open a poem with. Don't mourn for me when I'm dead and being eaten by worms. Nay, if you read this line, remember not the hand that writ it. For I love you so that I in your sweet thoughts would be forgot, if thinking on me then should make you woe. Oh, if, I say, you look upon this verse, when I perhaps compounded am with clay, do not so much as my poor name rehearse, but let your love even with my life decay. Okay, before we do the final couplet, what's the speaker saying to whoever the poem is addressed to? Let's assume it's the golden-haired youth. Don't dwell on me.
It'll make you sad.
It'll make you sad. What else might it do? Okay. Think about it. Because say again? Okay, like decay. Life decay. If thinking on me then should make you woe, oh, if, I say, you look upon this verse when I perhaps compounded am with clay, do not so much as my poor name rehearse. He's saying, don't, if you read this poem or think about it, or you think about my death, don't say my name. There's going to be a reason why. Lest the wise world should look into your moan. That is, lest the world should try to figure out why are you sad and mock you with me after I am gone. Well, how could the wise world mock the addressee with the speaker after the speaker is gone? Okay? By their association. Well, that seems to imply something about the relative status of each. If they're of an equal status, that would be no reason to mock. So why would you mock somebody? Exactly. If the speaker of the poem is of a lower status than the person being addressed. So that if the rest of the world said, oh, look at this. Let's do some autobiographical stuff. The Earl of Pembroke walking around sighing because Shakespeare, not a gentleman. Okay, keep in mind, gentleman is a social status comment. Not everybody could call themselves gentlemen. For one thing, you have to have a coat of arms in order to be called a gentleman. Shakespeare did purchase a coat of arms in the 1590s for his father. Now, his father had been mayor of Stratford-upon-Avon back in the 1560s and late 1550s. Pardon? No, he didn't have a coat of arms at that point. Okay? His father lost his job, probably because of his Catholicism. He stopped attending meetings of the aldermen and things like that and such, so he eventually lost his job. His father applied for a coat of arms 2 or 3 times and was denied. Shakespeare purchased a coat of arms in the late 1590s. And what this shows is that Shakespeare had developed enough of a reputation that the College of Arms granted this. And I kind of think there were probably some strings pulled because Shakespeare, according to anecdotal evidence, had one pretty big umpire in his box seat, and her name was Queen Elizabeth. I mean, she liked Shakespeare's plays. We know she saw one or two of them. Okay, we have anecdotal evidence in terms of diary entries, where somebody mentions Queen Elizabeth being at the plays, etc. Okay? So it could be that the speaker is addressing somebody of a higher social status. If the speaker is Shakespeare, then any one of those 3 or 4 possible people who could be the WH in that dedicatory epistle that we looked at the other day, any one of those guys would definitely be a higher social status because they were all earls. Shakespeare wasn't even close to an earl. Okay? Now look at 73. You've probably heard this one before because this is one of the most famous of Shakespeare's sonnets. That time of year thou mayst in me behold, when yellow leaves or none or few do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold. Bare ruined choirs where late the sweet bird sang. Now, line 4 there kind of sums up lines 2 and 3. It's really a long positive phrase that's telling you what lines 2 and 3 really mean. Okay? So we have an image in the first quatrain. That time of year thou mayst in me behold, when yellow leaves are none or few do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold, bare ruined choirs where the sweet birds sang. So the first image is of what? Tree with yellow leaves. Keep going. Fall. Okay. So it's the end of the year. That's the first image. It's also the first quatrain. Okay. Second image, quatrain. In me thou seest the twilight of such days after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self, that seals up all in rest. So what's the second image?
Death.
Okay. This is the end of the year. The second one, end of the day. Notice what we see happening. We get from large to small. All right? Third, in me thou seest the glowing of such fire that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. Okay. End of, specifically, here, it's the end of a fire, or end of youth, or end of life. Right? Notice, each one of these has to do with light. Okay? End of the year, days are shorter, nights are longer. Heat is gone, it's cold. End of the day, the light has gone, it's colder. The end of the fire. So, back up. That time of year thou mayst in me behold, when yellow leaves or none do hang, or few do hang, upon those boughs which shake against the cold. Bare ruined choirs where late the sweet bird sang. In me thou seest the twilight of such day, as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self, that seals up all in rest. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire, that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. Now, look at that last image for a moment. What kind of fire is he talking about? What kind of fire do you see in me now? Is this a blazing fire? Is this a big bonfire? No. What is it? That on the ashes of his youth doth lie. This is a bonfire the next day. If you've ever lit a big fire, even if you just lit a fire in a fireplace, and you've got the logs burning, you've got big flames, what happens when you go back an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours later? Is it still hot? Yes. Do you have flames? No. You have ashes. And what's underneath the ashes? Embers. Okay? So what is all the ash that's in the fire? It's the remains of your youth. Okay? It's what is left from the fuel. Because what happens to the log? What happens when, something burns? Two things happen. Okay? The matter changes. One to heat and wood to ash. Okay? So the heat is gone. So what's left? The ash. That on the ashes of his youth doth lie. Why does it lay on the ashes of his youth? As the deathbed. Because what will the ash do to the embers? It'll smother it. It'll put it out. Consumed with that which it was nourished by. That is, the fire will be consumed by what it was nourished by. It was nourished by the wood, but the wood is now turned to ash. And that is what is going to extinguish it. Okay? So 3 separate images, each one of them having to do with the end. This thou perceivest, which makes thy love more strong. In other words, the speaker says, you see this, don't you? You know I'm dying. I'm leaving. It's my end. Or it's the end. If you want to kind of stretch, make it a little bit more metaphorical, it's the end of our relationship, whatever. This thou perceivest, which makes thy love more strong. To do what? To love that well, which thou must leave ere long. Now, don't the first 3 quatrains kind of imply that it's a different person leaving? Each of these images are, you perceive in me what? The end of the year. You perceive in me the end of the day. You perceive in me the end of the fire. It's me, me, me that is leaving until you get to the final couplet. And Shakespeare turns it. This thou perceivest. You realize I'm on my last leg, which makes thy love more strong to love that well, which makes your love even more powerful to love that well. What's the that? Me, which thou must leave ere long. So what's really causing the end? It's the lover leaving. It's the lovers leaving in whatever the relationship is. Okay? That is the thing that's removing the heat and warmth and light of the year. That's the thing that's removing the sun from the day. That's the thing that's removing the wood from the fire. You're leaving. Okay? That final, he just turns it. Because what you expect is to love that well which must leave you ere long. That's how that final couplet should read, based upon the first 3 quatrains. And Shakespeare turns it around. Okay? Look at 87. It's another, it's a farewell. Somebody's leaving. Farewell. Thou art too dear for my possessing. Too dear there means you're too expensive for me. And like enough thou know'st thy estimate. That is, you know what your value or worth is. The charter of thy worth gives thee releasing. Charter. He's saying like the deed, the promissory note. Gives thee releasing. Why? Because my bonds in thee are all determinate. My bonds, like a municipal bond, a financial bond, has a date by which it must be paid. And he says, farewell. Why? Because my lease on you ran out. For how do I hold thee? But by thy granting. How are we even together? But because you have given yourself. And for that riches, where is my deserving? That is, for your giving of your riches, yourself, to me, what did I do to deserve that? What is there in me that deserves you? What's the speaker saying? I am so far beneath you. How in the world did I ever deserve to end up with you? In the positive sense. The cause of this fair gift in me is wanting. Meaning, there is no cause of this fair gift in me. Is wanting means it's lacking. So there's no cause. What is it? It's a free gift. Grace, if you want. And so my patent back again is swerving. That is, your gloss tells you my title to property. That is, my ownership of you. Yeah, it reverts back to you. Thyself thou gavest, thy own worth then not knowing. You gave yourself to me when? When you were young and innocent and not knowing what your real value or worth or estimation was, right?
The more and more we go over this, the thing you saw on Tuesday, it's starting to seem like the relationship between the two is almost parental or familial in some way. Is there any sort of stock in that? Because
On the part of, you mean the speaker to the other one, that the speaker is older and...
Well, I mean, it sounds like there's more than just. It's almost like maybe surrogate father or an uncle or something, some sort of actual love relation.
I think that's.
Kind of mentality.
I think that's possible. I've never come across any criticism that has suggested that, but I think that's possible, especially if the golden-haired youth is one of these individuals, if it's William or Herbert, Earl of Pembroke, or if it's Henry Wriothesley, or I can't remember the third one who has HW initials. Shakespeare was about 10 to 15 years older than all of them. Okay, so that could work. I don't know. That'd be an interesting thing to look into. Okay. So he says, you gave yourself to me when? When you didn't know what your own real worth was. Or you gave yourself to me when you mistook my real worth. Okay, and he's not talking existential worth. He's kind of talking reputation in the eyes of the world. Okay? So thy great gift upon misprision growing, that is, your gloss tells you misprision, error. Well, that is one of the meanings. Misprision, however, really implies bad eyesight. Okay? So your great gift grew upon, you're not really seeing me properly. Does what? It comes home again on better judgment making. In other words, you take yourself from me, why? Because now you really know me. You really know what I'm like. You really know how I am. Thus have I had thee as a dream doth flatter. Everybody in here has had a dream. Well, I'm going to assume. Everybody in here has had a dream where they've had an experience with an idol, if you want, or a fantasy or something, that when you woke up, you're like, no, don't go away. That's what he's talking about. I've had you like a dream as it flatters. What's the dream flatter? Me. In sleep, a king. A king. What is everybody else to a king? Subjects. So in his dream, he was like a king, and the person being addressed was my subject. But waking, no such matter. Because, apparently, the other individual realizes, you're not calling the shots here. I am a free agent too, so to speak. Okay? Now, do I have 93? Oh, I do have 93. Oh, good. This is a fun one. Okay? Because notice what is suggested. Between 87 and 93, something happens between the speaker and we'll call the other person the beloved. Okay? So shall I live, supposing thou art true. Don't even read the rest of the line. The next half line. So shall I live, supposing thou art true. What does that suggest? That they're not true. If I have to live supposing you are true, what does that mean? That means you're not. But I'm going to act like you are. Like a deceived husband. That is, I, like a deceived husband, shall live supposing thou art true. Okay? So he's saying, I'm like somebody being cheated on. Okay, I don't just. So love's face may still seem love to me, though altered new. Love's face, your face, when I look at you, may still seem like love to me. I'll look at you and I'll think, well, you still love me. Though altered new? What does that suggest? Does it suggest, the other person has gotten plastic surgery, put on different makeup? What's happened to the other person's face?
It's turned towards somebody else.
Okay. Literally? I mean, is he looking at the other person? The other person's looking over here?
She's in love with someone else.
Okay. So what's happened to the other person's face? Have you ever had this? I shouldn't be asking these personal questions. Have you ever had this happen? Where you've been in a relationship with somebody and then the other person finds somebody else? What might happen to that other person's face? It suddenly has a new light to it, a new glow to it. And what will sometimes happen if that other person, the third person, enters, let's say, the room? Their face lights up. And you go, Oh, okay. Though altered new, thy looks with me, thy heart in other place. Yeah, you're looking at me, but I know this is ticking for somebody else. For there can live no hatred in thine eye. Therefore, in that I cannot know thy change. What does it mean there can be no hatred in your eye? The speaker is looking at the beloved and says, all the speaker can see in that other person's eyes are love. Might not be towards me, but it's love. In other words, this person is like a god or goddess. So, when I look in your eyes, I can't see the change. In many's looks, the false heart's history is writ in moods and frowns and wrinkles strange. In other words, in previous human history, it was often the case where you could look at somebody's face and the change in their heart would be reflected by the change in their face. They look at you now and there's wrinkles or frowns, or their brow is frowned. Thank you. Brow is furrowed. Man, it's too early for my Alzheimer's to be kicking in. But heaven in thy creation did decree that in thy face sweet love should ever dwell. In other words, no matter what happens, no furrowed brow in this individual, no frowns, no sighs, whate'er thy thoughts or thy heart's workings be, thy look should nothing fence but sweetness tell. Oh. No matter what's going on in your heart, you might be contemplating murder, but you just look so sweet. How like Eve's apple doth thy beauty grow, if thy sweet virtue answer not thy show. Okay, what's Eve's apple? Temptation, knowledge of good and evil. Okay, so how like Eve's apple doth thy beauty grow? Your beauty, your face, your looks will grow into a temptation, a leading into sin. If what? If thy sweet virtue answer not thy show. So, where is thy sweet virtue? It's in here. If your behavior doesn't answer your face, if your behavior doesn't behave the way your face always looks, full of sweetness and light and love and truth and faithfulness and constancy and all that kind of stuff. In other words, if your behavior is directed at someone else, then your beauty has become what? A sinful temptation. And you will, as Eve's apple, lead men astray. Okay? It's unclear as to if this is directed to a man or a woman. Could be either. Because the face of beauty could be the face of the golden-haired youth. Now, what did the poet say, or the speaker say, at the beginning of the sonnet? Sonnets 1 through 20 or so. Go! Reproduce! Get married! Have children! Keep your beauty going on. All right? And it seems that by this point, the speaker seems to be saying, yeah, but I didn't mean get attached. It's just, go sow your wild oats. I don't care how many children you have by how many different mothers. But don't leave me. That is, give, as he says in Sonnet 20, give them your treasure, right? But give me your love, your relationship, your companionship, okay? Now look at 94. I think 94 and 93 are companion poems. That is, you have to read them together. They that have power to hurt and will do none, that do not do the thing they most do show, who moving others are themselves as stone, unmoved, cold, and to temptation slow. And all he means by that is those who have such beautiful faces that they hurt other people. That is, other people fall in love with them, but they don't reciprocate. Okay? That's why they that do not do the thing they most do show. Your gloss tells you. It's not entirely clear what this thing is, but it probably relates to romantic or sexual activity, though they inspire love but don't reciprocate. Okay? Who, moving others, that is, they are an inspiration for others, they are an attraction for others, they are themselves as stone. They're not attracted by others. Unmoved, cold, to temptation slow. They rightly do inherit heaven's graces and husband nature's riches from expense. Okay, what does that mean? They don't go spending everything they have. And I don't mean spending like pulling out your wallet and writing a check or spending cash. It means they don't waste their physical beauties. They conserve what they have. They are the lords and owners of their faces. Now notice he doesn't say they are the ladies. Okay? So lords could imply, definitely speaking to the golden-haired youth. They are the lords and owners of their faces, meaning in total control. Others, but stewards of their excellence. That is, other people are mere stewards. They don't own and they don't fully control. They manage. The summer's flower. What? I thought we were talking about faces and lords. And he suddenly shifts gears entirely. Line 9. The summer's flower is to the summer sweet, though to itself it only live and die. Okay, think, a daffodil. What's it do? It sprouts, it opens, and then it dies. But if that flower with base infection meet, base, common, vulgar, ordinary, the basest weed outbraves his dignity. So if that beautiful summer flower, what? Meets base infection, what happens? The basest weed, okay, outbraves his dignity. Meaning, that beautiful flower, if it meets base infection, rots. And the basest weed looks prettier by comparison. Think a rose and a dandelion. What happens if a rose gets a canker? It rots, it curls, the petals fall off. Meanwhile, the dandelion's just sitting there, smiling at the sun. The one, a base weed. The other, a beautiful rose. Why? For sweetest things turn sourest by their deeds. And lilies that fester smell far worse than weeds. So what's going on in the quote-unquote story of the speaker and the beloved?
Does this have anything to do with the theory that every time you had sexual relations, you gave up a year, you gave up a day of your life?
It could. There was a Renaissance commonplace, Renaissance notion that essentially every time you have an orgasm, you died a little bit. And depending upon the text, it might be you lose an hour of life, you lose a day of life, you lose a year of life. It's hard to really take it seriously in terms of the Renaissance thinkers taking it seriously, because there's all kinds of poems, and we're going to see one in Shakespeare, where the poets say, kill me, please, again, and again, and again, and again. John Donne's going to do this. He's going to talk about sex in one of the poems, and he's going to say, we die and rise again, and die and rise again. And let's just keep doing that. Dying and rising and dying. Okay? It could be that. I think there's something else, however. If you look at the last several poems, right?
Is he calling the new love an infection that's going to ruin the building?
What seems to have happened in the relationship? Somebody else has entered. It's like we have, let's say, the speaker. Let's assume so far we're still talking about the golden-haired youth. And somebody else has entered the picture and done what? Their attention had been like this. But now, there's this going on. And they say, hey, don't meet with base infection. Well, we're going to hear a bunch of poems about the dark-haired lady, or the dark lady, that's going to make it sound like she's got every venereal disease that walks under the sun. Okay? We're not sure what exactly that means. There are a couple of critics, I just read something last fall, who think they have figured out who the dark lady was. I'll talk about that next week. But if we want to get all autobiographical and say this is Shakespeare, and this is whoever one of these three guys is, okay, this then can become really important as to who that person is. All right? Okay, we'll stop there. And I don't know, we might skip 97 and 98. We'll see. We'll definitely finish the sonnets on Tuesday, though. Yes?